Welcome back. Today we are going to talk about hero talents because they were controversial after the reveal. They were controversial in alpha and in beta. They arrived more miss than hit. Visuals barely implemented. The backlash was real. But the good news today is that since then so much has improved, and with patch 11.0.5 on the PTR, there's actually hope for the hero talents that have been left behind. And that's because the last PTR update made a quiet change, a single line in the patch notes that tells us what Blizzard is willing to do. And the good news is it's working already. The Dark Ranger, the mere idea drove people insane, crying with joy. I mean, at long last, a crumb of the Dark Ranger fantasy in gameplay. BFA, the expansion, and Shadowlands aside, the whole Dark Ranger thing was sold so well by the BFA cinematic. And then the game happened. Dark Ranger just came out of the oven raw. Like, Black Arrow was back as its own ability, it had some interactions with the rest of their kit, but it just had no sauce. It was boring, and what it added was just another 30-ish second cooldown on top of the stack of those that the Hunters already had. It wasn't that exciting, and if it was 2 years ago, I basically would have said, better luck next expansion, you gotta wait for 2 years. But not now. Season 1 hadn't even started when Blizzard announced an almost full reworked Dark Ranger and pushed it to the PTR for testing. Now, you can get the Banshee wings, the effect that everybody loved from the cinematic, and you can combine that with the old Sylvanas armor that's coming in the trading post and the Dark Ranger customizations for elves to the point where you can now just get exactly what you want. And even better, we've played it, and the gameplay does not blow. It in fact slaps, just like today's sponsor. We're going to teach you back-end development, which is a strong job. Average salaries are 100 grand, often more, and you get access to very flexible work schedules in the field. They are boot.dev/Bellular. My link gets you 25% off your first purchase, and here's how they work for people like us. You see, they're gamers, they've got quests, XP, levels, community raids, they know games, and they also use them to help you learn. As an example, object-oriented programming is totally fine to learn normally, right? But learning it by building a simple RPG game combat system, well, that's us learning object-oriented programming using concepts we already understand to help the new stuff click. And that extends to more complicated projects, and that's what's amazing. They have courses, yes, but also guided projects and portfolio projects. So after, say, doing the course learning Python, you'll then be building a clone of Asteroids using Pygame and object-oriented programming concepts. And take it from me, after years in uni doing computer science, it's building projects that actually makes your knowledge concrete. I did terrible in exams, but what got me at first was projects. So you can hit up boot.dev/Bellular, you'll get 25% off your first purchase, and you can get learning. They post free demos of all their courses, and they've got a 30-day money-back guarantee. So here's how it works. Black Arrow now replaces your kill shot. It activates above 80%, and it's got more interactions with the death blow procs. And if you don't like pets, good news, because there's a choice to ignore the talent that procs you a Dark Hound. Now, Black Arrow can reset its own cooldown or spread aim shot damage. It even adds Murder of Crows back as an effect, which will be nice for the hunters that miss it. Disengage is particularly cool. It actually launches you back with a whole bunch of shadow daggers. It almost feels more like a Heroes of the Storm ability, which is great. Long story short, in every way it is better. The biggest upgrade, though, is probably to Withering Fire. So every 4 Bestial Wraths or every True Shot, you'll auto-fire AoE Black Arrows every time you would get a normal proc for 12 seconds. And you sprout the Banshee wings while you do it, complete, of course, with a perfect sound effect. It's pretty damn sick, and for MM in particular, it means that every time you pop True Shot, you just feel awesome. Now, it's not a full spec. Hunter is obviously still Hunter, but here, this makes enough of a difference to actually matter. It's basically exactly what a hero talent tree should be, even though, yes, it's not what many people want, which is obviously class skins. And that's because ever since Green Fire was added to Warlocks and Mists of Pandaria, which was 11 years ago, by the way, people have wanted to customize their class in ways that aren't just gameplay. And the rough thing about Shadowlands is Blizzard not really understanding that is one of the reasons why the Covenants kind of fell flat. The choice of aesthetics was really cool, but it was tied to borrowed power for a whole expansion. I mean, there's abilities I wanted to use, but I just didn't like the Covenant. And so to a smaller degree, that issue still does exist here, right? Like, these are hero talents, they're not class skins, they are tied to gameplay, and that will not change. But the good news is that rather than be class skins, they're edging closer and closer to something that does feel like it has a place in the game, and that is subclasses, subspecs essentially. And people have kind of wanted that for years. And the good news is, it's not just for Dark Ranger. There's such a good chance you've been sleeping in this, so Deathbringer for Frost and Blood DKs has been a total dark horse. Everybody basically looked at Riders of the Apocalypse and thought, holy shit, that is cool, I have got my riders, I can run around in my mount, and that meant that nobody was looking at the other tree. And it turns out it can secretly be extremely cool. Now, the big winner with Deathbringer is Exterminate. Basically, you apply Reaper's Mark, then you build it up, then you burst it. That gives you 2 stacks of Exterminate, and that makes your next big attack, which is Obliterate or Marrow Rend, cheaper and cause 2 massive swings of the Death Scythe. You get huge spikes of damage, the chance to apply another mark to start looping your scythes, and just the smug knowledge that everybody in your group can just hear and see what you did because the scythes are so damn cool. Now here's where it gets interesting and video worthy. This ended up being too strong, right? Overwhelmingly strong in Blood because they could stack it up so fast. That's because, of course, Blood Plague tripled with Dancing Rune Weapon, takes a Shadow Frost, and that just fills it right up. And you end up just, doing way too much. And that means the nerf bat was definitely going to come. It has came, but it's done so with a bit of a twist. It's got a small rework that loses none of the fun, redistributes a little power, and adds great new quality of life. Most importantly, there's a new talent that gives Soul Reaper procs, and that means the Deathbringer tree is now more focused on the existing death fantasy on top of being probably the most striking death-related ability in World of Warcraft, the game overall. But then there's something else. Reaper's Mark has proven strong enough that you want to open with it, and that then caused a few issues. So now it grants 3 Bone Shield charges for Blood and Killing Machine for Frost. And that basically means Blizzard saw being overpowered, they saw the gameplay problems, and they've rapidly went and made it way better but also sustainable. But that's not all for the DKs. A tiny line has done a huge amount to fix the other blood tree, San Lane. So it used to activate with Vampiric Blood, and that turned a defensive into an offensive, and it kind of threw the whole spec into a weird disarray. Now though, it activates with Dancing Rune Weapon, which is your offensive cooldown. Technically speaking, it's a tiny change, but gameplay-wise, that's completely transformational. And it kind of means that either they play the game, see their mistakes, and work on them, or they're just very well attuned to the feedback. That's the one takeaway that I've been seeing looking at the PTR. And thankfully the same can be said for the people working on most of the hero talents right now. As an example, Paladin's Lightsmith got 2 out of place and very specific talents replaced, and the new additions are just themed perfectly, right? So one of the new Lightsmith talents turns you and your buff buddy into proper partners where overhealing to one will transfer to the other, and if either of you drop below 40% health, you lend each other some health for the next few seconds. So that's really neat. And the other one is a cooldown reduction on interrupts, which of course is perfect for the Prot and the Holy Paladins who just love being absolute life-saving gods in Mythic Plus. But that's actually not all, because the Shaman's Stormbringer is a similar story. You can now randomly get struck by lightning, which normally is a bad thing, but here it gives you speed, which is pretty cool, and they've also hotfixed a key annoyance where pressing the new button proc Tempest wasn't always your highest priority, so you'd basically feel like your procs would be wasted. That sucks when it happens, so they've just made it stack twice. That's a really simple change, on top of another really simple change, that just shows they're looking for complaints and looking for ways to add flavor, and actually they're able to do it fast instead of next expansion. Then they've also ironed out minor issues with all 3 hero talent trees, as an example Farseer proccing off more than just Lava Burst. Then for the Warlocks, good news for Diabolists, you've had a bit of a change to kill some degenerate gameplay, and not via a nerf, but actually by buffing the weaker side of things to feel better. And then Rogues finally have got their biggest issue with the Trickster tree fixed, which is a coup de grace will not lock you out of actions for a few seconds, which is pretty big. And the wild thing is, that's not even all of the fixes and changes that are coming. Mages have had Sun Fury and Spellslinger fixes, Priest has got some key Archon updates, and more are sure to come. The point here, though, is it actually seems they're committed to doing things right, and they've changed how they actually develop the game. A game producer called George Velev said as much in a few different interviews. As an example to Mr. GM, he said that these are basically part of your character going forward, like the hero talent trees, and that like their original vision for talents, they're not borrowed power. They're actually a part of our core class. They're not something that'll just be thrown in the bin when the next expansion comes, and so that means they're treating them with the utmost seriousness, not as if they're something where, realistically, you can only polish it so much till the point where there's just no point anymore, because they're going to be replaced. And that, of course, brings me to the future. This leaves us with a fairly interesting big picture. Now look, I obviously cannot tell the future, but we can extrapolate. Whenever Dragonflight launched with completely new talents, we were excited, but when it came to gameplay, Blizzard kind of botched loads of them. They then basically spent a whole expansion tinkering and fiddling, sometimes minor iterations, sometimes just throwing a tree out and starting again. I mean, look at the Rat Paladin rework of 1007. Now, that got us to where we're at right now, a place with very few class complaints, at least if you're not a Demon Hunter. And the Demon Hunters actually bring up a new problem for the WoW team, and that's that some upgrades, like with the Paladin and the Mage, they're actually getting so good that we've got a higher standard for classes now. That is a pretty damn serious win, even if it doesn't always feel like it. And that means we can expect to end this expansion with just about all of the hero talents in a radically better place than they're in right now. And probably the same for Dells, given all of the crazy launch issues they had. The good news, though, is they've done loads of hotfixes. They've basically settled on the design now for Season 1, and you can learn how to thrive in light of all of those changes by checking out this video next.